Before you can get serious about working on your relationship, there are a couple of things to seriously consider. First and foremost, it's important to get clear about why you're choosing to stay in this relationship. We're going to talk a lot about choosing and choosing in today's episode, and you're going to hear the words choose in or choose out as it pertains to your relationship. But know that our aim and our goal for this episode is to help each of you choose into your relationship, to choose to be a better partner, to choose to bring your best self to the relationship so that you can grow and make your relationship better, stronger, and more fruitful. So if you find yourself at ground zero right now and not sure how to get started working on your relationship, buckle up because you've stumbled on to the right episode.
Welcome to today's new episode. Before we begin, just as a reminder, if you're new here, we do drop a new episode every week. So while it's on your mind, go ahead and click on that subscribe button. That way you never miss a future episode. And for those of you who are our loyal listeners, thank you so much for continuing to support the show. You know that we don't gatekeep. Every week it's like a free coaching session with us. And for us to be able to continue bringing value each and every week, we really need your continued support by simply leaving us a 5-star review and a comment. You would be surprised how much this really does help us to keep the show going and make a greater impact.
Okay, so you may have noticed over the past couple of episodes, we've been having a little bit of fun.
We have.
Talked about men's hormones and sex, talked about women's hormones and sex, and we talked about cold plunging.
We did.
And sex. But we sort of feel like maybe we need to get back to some of our core message, which is that relationships are not up to chance. It's not a coin flip. The research lays out a very clear path for us to follow on how to forge a meaningful relationship. And we know that based on decades of research, what the masters of relationships do differently from the disasters. And we know that when we follow those who've modeled excellence, the masters, in their relationships, we too can create excellence in our relationships.
Whether you're in a relationship that has been struggling or whether you just want to make your relationship stronger, there's an important place to begin. Working on your relationship starts with a simple but powerful act of volition. That is, it requires you to make a conscious decision to choose into this relationship.
And one of the most basic fundamental human needs is autonomy, which is the right for self-determination. Watching a 2-year-old and within a couple of minutes, you'll inevitably hear the words, no. Every human being is hardwired with this drive to sort of chart their own course in life and not be subjugated by anyone or something. And when as individuals, we start to feel like our autonomy is threatened, we inevitably resist and fight back. That is human nature. This is why it's very important for us as individuals to feel like we have a choice in all things. In the work that we do, we have a set of operating beliefs for ourselves. One of those beliefs is that all the techniques we use to help a client should increase choice.
So what does that mean? Well, when a client presents for coaching, they typically feel kind of stuck. They feel stuck like they don't have options. And this is because they don't see choices. And it's not my job as a coach to guide people to what I think that they should do or what they shouldn't do. My job is to help them expand their ability to see choices and then to sort of guide them toward new ways of thinking about their problems. Sometimes I might do this. I might help clients to discover, for example, new options for how to perceive a past traumatic event. And if I'm doing my job pretty well, then maybe I can even help them to start to see possibilities for the future.
That sounds cool.
In every aspect of marriage, though, choosing is just so essential. It's so important. Even though we want to be connected to this person, and even though we have this drive for connection, we still maintain that we want to continue to have our right to choose. But sadly, a lot of us are in the marriage or in the relationship in such a way where we actually don't really feel like we do have a choice.
Yeah, some people just feel hopeless is the word.
Stuck,
Stuck.
trapped.
Yeah.
even, right?
Right.
And because we've convinced ourselves that we don't have choices, we do have that feeling of being trapped. So, for example, some people are in a marriage because they think they can't handle it financially on their own. Some people stay in a marriage because they think they can't handle losing maybe their friend group or maybe part of their community. Some people are afraid of the social backlash that they might experience if they were to get divorced. And oftentimes the biggest reason why couples will stay together in a marriage that's unhappy is because they're doing it for the children.
Yeah. And that's sort of a problem when the children grow up. So maybe you can take a moment and contemplate why you're choosing to stay in this relationship or marriage right now that you're currently in. Why are you choosing this marriage when, quite frankly, you know you could choose otherwise? In fact, by choosing otherwise, it's likely that some things in your life probably get a heck of a lot simpler. You could, for example, you could go live in a trailer out in the woods in the mountains by yourself, and you'd never have the pressure of having to grow up, put your socks away, do the dishes. You wouldn't have to tolerate the discomfort of looking figuratively in the mirror. Probably you'd grow a big beard and let yourself go, but you wouldn't have anybody reflecting those things that you needed to improve on about yourself. And you'd probably have another conflict again. You wouldn't have any more conflict. I mean, maybe with bears, but not with people.
Right.
Yeah.
So why are you here?
Yeah.
And why are you choosing to stay in this relationship? Because in case you hadn't realized it yet, you don't have to. You could choose a lot of things. You could choose a divorce. You could choose to break up. You could choose to separate. And whatever you choose, you could create a good life, an honorable life. I think that it's really important for you to let this question sink in for a moment. And here's why. When we need a marriage, either because we're doing it for the kids or for the finances or for whatever reason, when we need the marriage to work, we're not in a position to actually choose it. Let me say that again. When we need a marriage to work so badly, right, for whatever reason, then we don't have the autonomy to actually really be able to choose it.
Feel trapped.
Needing is a very different energy from choosing. Needing is similar to things like, I have to do this or I should do that, right? And almost anything that is done from that energy that I need to do it, it leads to a sense of resentment because, again, we're not exercising, we're not self-determining, we're not using that autonomy.
And you see that in individuals when they say like, oh, I have to go to work or I have to go practice this or whatever that is. Maybe it's a sport or maybe it's the piano. But when they want to,
right?
When they find joy in that and they choose to, it's a completely different mindset.
And it has a completely different meaning for them.
Yeah. And the performance in said activity is a lot better as well.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we're going to ask you, why are you choosing this relationship? Let me share a little metaphor I think that illustrates this. When we moved into our current house, there's one area in the backyard where we wanted to put a garden. And so it was just, I think they had left it as dirt, but there was this bush that somebody had planted there. And we never really figured out what this bush was, but it reminded me of some sort of a currant or a berry bush or something. It was really just weedy and viney and had lots of, spikes on it. It was just taken over this whole part of the yard, where we had wanted to install this garden. And this bush never produced any kind of flower or fruit. It was really just painful thorns and just sharp edges. And, as a matter of fact, it sort of just kept us out of that area of the yard until we managed it.
Wasn't pretty. It wasn't flowering. It wasn't fruitful in any way.
And so if we plant something we want in our yard, we want it to have purpose, right? When we see grapevines, we expect them to contain grapes. If we see a fig tree, we expect it to produce figs. And if a farmer noticed that one of his peach trees is not bearing any fruit, he'll just cut it down because it's useless to him otherwise.
So what does this metaphor have to do with choosing? So your reason for choosing to work on your relationship will determine whether the relationship will bear fruit or not. If you answer the question by saying, I'm working on my relationship because I don't know if I can financially make it on my own, or I'm only working on the relationship because of the kids. Well, that's not a fruitful meaning for that relationship. And that reason is not going to yield any sort of beautiful, delicious fruit
Or flowers.
or flowers.
Yeah.
It's likely only going to yield thorns of resentment.
Ooh, that's a good quote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who stay married, forever to the same person, but not all of those relationships actually bear fruit, because in those relationships, not everyone actually chooses in.
They don't choose in. A lot of people don't choose in.
These are the ones that are stuck in these sort of long-term relationships.
Oh, and they're not choosing in, right?
And they're not inspiring to people, by the way.
There's really a lot fewer people who say to themselves, you know what? I get to decide each and every day. I get to decide if I'm really going to choose this person. And I get to decide whether or not I'm here in this relationship to grow and to forge a fruitful meaning. Very few people, I would say, actually look at themselves and ask themselves, am I choosing to bring my best self to this relationship in order to actually love this person well? Even a person who has flaws and blind spots and who's annoying and who can drive me crazy.
She keeps pointing at me when she does this.
I am pointing
she's
at
pointing
you.
at me. Yeah.
Maybe you were driving me crazy a few minutes ago. Right. But yet I am still choosing to love this person and create a meaningful, fruitful future with this person anyway. And that right there, that would be a fruitful reason to choose a relationship.
So whatever your situation is right now, it's important to expand your ability to see that you have choices, to realize that you don't have to stay here. You have other options, but you are deciding and choosing to stay here. Now, here's something interesting and sometimes frustrating about these choices that we make. Sometimes the choices you want may not always be available to you, because at times the choices we want involve other people, and these other people also have free will. But don't let that trick you into believing that you don't have any choice.
That's right. So let me actually just give you a quick example of that recently happened to me. So just recently I did an intake with a new couple, and she decided after the initial session that she didn't want to work on the marriage. She chose out.
I remember this.
Right?
Yeah.
We actually didn't even get a chance to do any interventions. We didn't get a chance to do any work, because after that first intake, she decided that it was too much for her to choose him.
And that left him with some choices.
It did. It did. He had wanted to build a meaningful, fruitful life together, and she decided that that was too much, that he wanted too much, that was too overwhelming for her, which did leave him with choices.
Yeah, it's always so hard, because the things you choose oftentimes really are in relationships dependent on what the other person chooses.
But the important thing is to realize, at least for him in this case, that even though that choice that he wanted, that he would have preferred, wasn't available to him, which would have been to have this fruitful, epic marriage, just because that wasn't available to him because she didn't want it, didn't mean that he didn't have choices.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's important for us to continue to see that we have options. So he still gets to choose who he will be in the face of this new reality. He still gets to choose to be the best version of himself. He still gets to choose how he will treat her.
Absolutely.
He also gets to choose what kind of example that he's going to set for his children. And he also gets to choose to look at the situation and look at the problems that got created in the relationship and own his part of that, and look at his participation in the patterns and see where his opportunity to grow is.
Absolutely.
Right? And then to look at that growth opportunity and find meaning in that journey of growth.
Yeah.
So even though the choice that he wanted wasn't available to him, he still has choices.
Still have choices. So sometimes we feel like we're stuck and we don't have choices. We just haven't realized that there are other choices.
Right.
And a lot of those choices have to do with how you show up, how you become your best self.
Right.
In that relationship. Yeah. Now, this idea of choice also applies to doing the work. Working on making your relationship better is also a daily choice. There are things that Charlotte and I do daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly that we consider non-negotiable. Even though our relationship is at a place where we really feel like it's solid, we still choose to put in that effort, because there was once upon a time when we didn't. put in that effort.
That's right.
And that's not the life we want to live now. So we continue to choose the things that we want and know that they matter, even though it would be easier not to.
Yeah. So working on the relationship is a choice. Being in the relationship is a choice. How you show up in the relationship is a choice. And working on the relationship is a choice. And again, you don't have to do it. So get away from and no more of this, like, I'm working on my marriage because I should, or I'm working on my marriage because if I don't, he will just leave me. Or, you know what? I'll just appease him. I'll just accommodate her. I'll accommodate her to get her off my back. Like none of that thinking, because that is stuck thinking. All you're doing in these situations is trying to trick yourself into thinking that you don't have choices, but you do have choices. So either make the choice or not, that you're choosing the more difficult thing because it will stretch you to becoming the man or the woman that you actually want to be. Choose that you're willing to let the marriage or this relationship do exactly what it's designed to do, which is to grow you up, to make you stronger, to make you better, to refine you.
Yeah, marriage is a growing machine. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And if you're already in therapy or if you're already in coaching and you get tasked with some homework to do, like in between sessions, then make the conscious choice to go all in with the homework. Not because you have to, but because you want to have a stronger, more solid sense of self. Because you're choosing to live up to the marriage. You're becoming a more loving partner. And above all, because you want to honor yourself and the commitment that you've made to become the best version of yourself. Now, as we wrap up this concept, we want you to leave you with some reflection questions that you can go and journal about this week.
All right. So write down these questions in your journal and consider them this week as you're going throughout your week. So the first question is the question we've been asking all episode. Why would you like to stay and choose this marriage or this relationship that you're in? When you know you could choose otherwise, why are you choosing to stay? And make sure it's a fruitful meaning that you're creating. Secondly, what are you willing to do to forge a meaningful relationship together? Are you willing to do anything? And if not, what prevents you? So ponder on and journal on these questions this week. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about one other critical factor that I've noticed most couples need to consider before they really dive in to start working on healing their relationship. So stay tuned for that next week.
So remember, today is the day that you get to choose into your relationship. And if there was one message I wanted to leave with you today, it would be wake up every day choosing to be your best self and choosing to be the best partner to that person in your relationship.
Who you've chosen.
Yeah, who you've chosen.
Mm-hmm.
Until then, we thank you so much for being here today, and we're grateful for all of you. We love hearing from you, and we kindly ask that if you've not left us a review and a 5-star rating yet, that you go ahead and do that. And
of course, be kind to each other this week. Take care of each other. Remember, it's the small and simple things that we do often that make the biggest impact.